Good evening. I'm State Senator Brian Collmore, and I will act as moderator for tonight's town hall, which will focus on crime and public safety. I'd like to first of all welcome the Governor of the state of Vermont, Phil Scott, who has just arrived and will be with us tonight. Governor, we appreciate your joining us this evening. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to go down our panel and have each of them introduce themselves and then pass the microphone along.
Good evening. I am Mike Dudges. I am Mayor of Rutland City.
Hi, I'm Brian Kilcullen, the police chief for Rutland City Police Department.
Hi, I'm Commander Matt Prouty, Rutland City Police Department and Executive Director of Project Vision.
I'm Ian Sullivan, and I'm talking too loud. I am Rutland County State's Attorney. I'm in my first term as your elected State's Attorney.
Good evening, Al Cormier, Chief of Operations for the Vermont Department of Corrections.
Hello, I'm Representative William Knott. I represent Rutland City at State House, where I serve on the House Judiciary Committee, and I also serve as an Assistant Majority Leader in the House.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Tom Burdick. I represent West Rutland, Clarendon, Wallingford, and Rutland Town, and I'm the Vice Chair of House Judiciary.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming out. I'm Terry Williams, Senator for Rutland County. I'm on the Health and Welfare and Education Committee, and I'm from Poland.
Thank you, one and all. I'd also like to recognize folks who are in the audience and our elected officials. Representative Paul Clifford, Representative Eric McGuire, State Senator David Weeks, Representative Jim Harrison, and Representative Art Peterson. We also have a great majority of the Board of Aldermen with us tonight. Joe Barbagallo is here, Larry Coopoli, Sharon Davis, Bill Gillum Jr., Cheryl Hooker, John McCann, Kiana McClure, and Michael Talbot are all with us this evening. So over the 25-day period from October 5th through the 30th, there were 8 homicides in Vermont, including one, unfortunately, here in Rutland County. Most of us also hear or read on a daily basis about individuals who are accused of crimes like robbery, assault, and vandalism. They get cited and in many cases are released and then, unfortunately, reoffend quickly. The current situation is not one that bodes well for the public to feel safe. And I'm guessing no one came here tonight to offer congratulations to one another about our current situation, not just here in Rutland County, but throughout the state. I talk to neighbors every day who are concerned and frightened and upset. In fact, I am reminded of the line that Howard Beale famously used in the movie Network. Maybe some of you can remember that. Beale played a network anchor, and the country was going through some tough times when he said, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore." I think many of us are feeling that way, and we are here tonight to try to come up with solutions. Later, you will hear from legislators about bills that will be introduced this coming session that will address some of our common concerns. You'll also hear from people representing local and state government and agencies who deal with crime and public safety every day, and we will get their perspectives on how we can correct what is very obviously a problem. This meeting is hosted by the Mayor's Office as an informational session for our community. And while members of the Board of Aldermen are present, please note this is not an official Alderman meeting or a meeting of any city board or committee. In order to ensure compliance with regulations, we kindly request that board members sit far apart from each other and refrain from discussing the contents of this meeting amongst themselves. It's important to note that some of the topics discussed here may potentially come before the board for future deliberation and decision-making. Please feel free to approach individual board members at the conclusion of the event for any inquiries, but we kindly ask that board members do not congregate with each other to prevent the formation of a quorum. We're talking about the public affairs situation here. And out of an abundance of caution, questions directed sent in by the board members have been excluded from the Q&A section. As this meeting is solely an informational session hosted by the mayor's office and no official city business will be conducted, minutes of this will not be kept. However, we're grateful to PEG TV for offering to record this meeting for future viewing purposes. I want to make it clear at the outset, we're not going to take questions from the audience. I know that may disappoint a lot of you that came here tonight, but the ones that we have are all been submitted ahead of time. Over 100 questions were submitted, and some of those will be asked tonight. We couldn't possibly ask all 100, but if you have questions, you can see the QR code, which will be up on the screen, and you can direct a question to that, and we will get it to the appropriate person. So before we move on, I want to offer my own perspective on the current situation, because I think sometimes people can unfairly assess blame. I do not think this is a problem because of what our law enforcement agencies are doing or not doing. Our officers work diligently to respond to calls and bring individuals back to the station and cite them. They're overworked and they're doing their best.
Agreed.
I also don't think the state's attorney's office is doing anything which would inhibit public safety. The merits of charging each case is taken seriously and due consideration is given to current statutes. And I also do not feel the judicial branch is lax or not performing to the best of its ability.
Disagree. Disagree.
A judge can only adjudicate a case based on the law. All right, we're going to keep this civil, please, or you're going to have to leave.
Oh, you can't handle lying, we can't either.
That only leaves one entity, ladies and gentlemen, the legislature. In order to effect change in our current landscape, the 180 members of the General Assembly have to come together and give the other branches of government improved tools to use. It should be a priority in the coming session. We make the laws, and they need to reflect the concerns of our citizens. If they need to change, then they should be changed. I'd now like to turn things over to Rutland City Mayor Mike Dunches.
Thank you, Brian. First off, I want to say thank you to our state leaders that are here, the representatives that have come from different departments, the governor himself, the people that are up here. You know, it's interesting, everybody's here in this room because they care about Rutland in one way or another. You came tonight because you care about your community, you care about your families, you care about what's happening to your community.
We care about where our tax dollars are being spent.
To that end, I'm going to go over what is the status here in our city. And we're going to talk about the data that shows exactly where we're at in the city of Rutland from a crime standpoint. We're going to talk about the challenges tonight, the common understanding of that challenges between all of us in this city, and how we're going to look at addressing that rising crime. That's what the whole board is here to do this evening. And then a path forward, right? When we leave here tonight, we want to look at a few different things where we can take some action. What can we do administratively, right? Things that can be done without the legislature, things that can be done within departments, within different avenues throughout the state and within the city. What can we do as a community, and then what can we do legislatively? So let's start with the data. So this is our call volume comparison. By the way, if any of you want to see this, the second and fourth, I believe, Tuesday, is it second and fourth Tuesday of every month? Every other Tuesday based on the calendar, right? Okay. So the every other Tuesday, we present this data in a meeting called RutStat at the police department in the Project Vision Center. So this data is available to the public, and you can come see this anytime. So this is our call volume comparison, and when we look at this data, it's year to date, so January through October of each of these years. So you can see that there's been a pretty consistent increase over the last 3 years of calls to our police department. We are down a little bit right now, but depending on the time of year and weather, it can affect things like that.
I'm sure
But
the hotel industry that has come
excuse me,
about-
I appreciate the feedback. We are actually in a minute gonna have a part on the screen where if you wanna give us some feedback, you can scan that QR code and continue to give it during the meeting. So, one thing to point out though, is that it is consistently climbing 14 to 11 over 7. This is part of why you're feeling the challenge, but these are the numbers that our police department faces every single day. This increasing call volume. So let's talk about what those calls consist of. So looking back a few years and looking at today, we've seen homicides increase in our city. We've had an additional one this year, and we had so we had 2 this year and 1 last year. That's a shock in Rutland. This is Rutland city data, by the way. I want to keep that in mind. This is city data. This doesn't include the town. This doesn't include Castleton. This is our city. But that's still a shock to our systems when we all grew up here, and that had never really happened before. So that's a big deal. This is part of why we're feeling it. But there's also a slight decrease in robberies. That's a nice number to see that has gone down. But burglaries are up still, and assaults are up. So crime is still continuing to climb, even though some of these points may be down a little bit. Here's the one thing that everybody sees though, and this is the one that really affects us in our homes and right on that edge of what we're doing. This is the data of petty larceny. And petty larceny are these people that are in your driveways, in your cars, maybe they're on your front porch, and they're trying to take things. These are the thefts that we're hearing about in Walmart and the other stores downtown and around our city. These are the ones that come up almost every single day, and they are up. Burglary is also up. Assault is luckily down a little bit, but those numbers are still big for our community. So what I wanted to do was show you that this is where we're at as a city. That we all understand that this is hard and this is painstaking, but these numbers right here are the strong numbers in our community, and these are what we're seeing every single day that are they're causing the alert and the alarm. When we look at retail theft, one thing that I really wanted to point out on this, these are the retail thefts in our community over that same time period. 75% of those offenders are known substance users. This is directly tied to the opioid epidemic in our city.
And yet you opened the hotels.
Yeah,
We'll have plenty of time to discuss the situations here. So I think it's important to make note that regardless of whether it's the hotel situation or it's people in our community, these numbers are real and they are seriously challenging for our officers and our community members. We are trying to deal with this every day. This is why we're discussing this tonight. I think one thing to note though that goes even beyond this, and this is where some of the exhaustion is coming in what we call, it's called compassion fatigue, but it's also this piece where our officers are continuing to deal with the same people over and over. If you look at that number right there, that repeat, that's 30% is repeat offenders in these crimes. So that's a really high number. So I want to set this groundwork. I want to level set in this data because when we have this conversation tonight, we all need to understand where these numbers are at. Although our violent crimes exist, and I do want to go back to that slide, although these violent crimes exist, what we're really seeing in our community is these numbers in the petty pieces, and we're trying to deal with that, but that's where some of the laws that we're struggling with are faltering because of the types of crimes that we're having to address and how we get to address those.
Go back to 17, 18, and 19 and show us the numbers.
They're much lower.
Exactly.
So okay.
That's because the police weren't half the problem.
The police are not the problem.
So again, please, listen, I'm gonna ask you to refrain.
They are not the problem.
The police are not the problem. We are going to, listen, I'm gonna ask everybody to refrain from talking because we are all trying to be here to listen to the information. So I'll finish my part here shortly and we can start the discussion. So let's talk about what we're doing in Rutland City because this is the challenge that I'm faced with as mayor. These are important things for us to address. So how can we as a city address these things? Even though, as Senator Collmore discussed, some of this is legislation. How can we address these things in our city? So what we're doing is we're looking at proposed budget increases for the police department for their salary and recruitment efforts. Thank you very much. This has been in conversation with the chief and his commanders for some time, and we are actually looking at, even outside of our budget cycle, looking to make an adjustment before the next contract to entice officers to stay in our city and bring new officers to our city. This is really important for our community. We're looking for continued support from our community from a point of, when you see something, say something. So I'm going to give you an example. There have been a lot of challenges over here at our transit center. We know about them, we talk about them. But until recently, the transit center and the people who work there were not calling our police department. When they started calling, those numbers and those calls began to get logged, and we were able to address it. And now crime has actually gone down at the transit center because we've been addressing it. If you see something, you need to let us know. It does not mean that if our officers are working on something else that they'll be able to immediately respond, but they're going to try their best to get to your issue as quickly as possible every single time you call. And then community involvement, we're going to talk tonight about some of those things, but one of the things that Chief and I have been talking about pretty consistently is how do we put together a neighborhood watch type group. So at the end of the conversation tonight, there's going to be another QR code, not for questions, but if you would like to sign up for a neighborhood watch and have that be a part of your community, there is going to be an opportunity. It'll be community-led, community-volunteered, and tied directly to Project Vision in our police department so that we can work with you to patrol those communities in the right way, in the lawful way that works the best to keep our officers informed, and keep moving forward. So, like I said, if you have questions or comments throughout tonight, this QR code, you can take a picture of that. This will stay up behind us, and this will take you to the same form that you could have filled out for the questions this evening. Those questions we will distribute to the people that can best answer them and get you answers. That is the goal. So questions submitted tonight, we'll send to the proper legislator, we can send it to the state's attorney's office, we can send it to the police department, and we'll pass those along. As Senator Collmore stated, we have 100 submitted questions already, and we are not going to have the ability to answer those or questions, all of those or questions here tonight. So we're going to try our best to choose the questions that best suit the overall incoming questions that were asked and the needs and concerns that you have.
Your QR code, is this what you, when you were elected, how you're going to move the city forward by using QR codes instead of dealing with...
This is an easy way for us to get your feedback as quickly as possible.
You didn't get the job because it was easy.
No.
This is not an easy job.
No, it's not.
And neither is standing here and dealing with people in front of you.
So I'm gonna say this one more time, and I appreciate the feedback. Listen, I appreciate the feedback of my citizens. This is a very large room with a lot of people in it, and there's a lot of people that have questions and concerns tonight, and we want to address as many of those as possible. But if you'd like to continue the conversation, this is a way that you can do that, or you can meet with us after the meeting is over and we've finished the panel. Thank you very much. Brian, it's back to you. Thank you very much.
Certainly want to thank the mayor for making me the moderator tonight. We have a series of questions. Trust me, I understand your frustration, but we're not going to get anything done if we continually get interrupted. If it's not what you wanted to have happen, we're doing our best. And there'll still be plenty of time to interact back and forth. So the first question I want to direct to Police Chief Brian Kilcullen. What specific initiatives or strategies are in place to address the recent increase in crime rates in our community?
Thanks, Senator. So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Again, we hope to not cast blame on anyone, but again, talk about the issues that do exist, come up with solutions, and really put out some information so everyone really understands sort of what's causing the conditions that do exist. as I think many of you know, our authority is really somewhat limited, and it's limited by statute. And as the senator mentioned early on, we referred to the legislature. We're bound by the laws that are created by the legislature. Authorities granted to us by the Constitution. But as I said, our authority is really limited by the laws that exist. And I'll go to some specific examples of what that means, what it looks like on the street to our officers who are out there trying to, to bring safety to the city, to reduce and minimize the chaos in the city. But to answer the question specifically, about what initiatives that we're participating in to really reduce the crime rates. We think it's important for those who are responsible for creating the chaos to be held accountable. And what we're doing is trying to get those individuals before the court as quickly as possible. So whenever we're responding to a crime with the crime against a person, we're trying, when our capacity exists, to flash cite or lodge this person, the defendant, immediately. We're not citing 4 weeks out, as I said, when our capacity allows us to do that. But we think that's important, as I said, for the individuals creating this chaos to appear before the court as quickly as possible. That's one thing we can do. One other thing that we're trying to do, many of you have probably heard about our community resource specialists. We're trying to identify the underlying issues that are causing individuals to perpetrate the crimes they're perpetrating. Our community resource specialists are not sworn officers, they're civilian members of the department, but they have the ability to spend more time to connect with the resources in the community, connect those creating the chaos with resources in the community to address the underlying issues that are causing them to really cause harm to the community. So that's one of the big things that we're trying to do. When the program started, Commander Prouty was our first community resource specialist. We pulled him out of retirement, that was August of 22, and he transitioned back to a sworn position as a commander in January of 23. And so he's been with us almost a year as a commander, executive director of Project Vision. Since then, we've hired 2 additional community resource specialists. You may have met Bill Giotti and Julie Fitzgibbons. But again, those are some of the things that we think are important to really reduce the chaos. And we're looking.
You can't help anybody that doesn't want.
So again, we want to get through the questions. And I'm sorry if I can't address the comments. I'm hoping the comments can wait till later. But I'd like to get through the questions and offer you, as I said, kind of identify some of the things that we are doing. And give you a real sense for what the condition that exists, what it means to us out in the street. So again, 2 things. As I said, flash cite, lodge whenever we can, get the defendants before the court as soon as possible, involve our CRSs whenever appropriate, the other thing, the mayor mentioned our RUTSTAT meetings every other Tuesday. We're mapping out our crime, we're identifying our hotspots. And when our officers have some discretionary time, we want to put them in those hotspot areas. One of those, as you can probably appreciate, is Bend the Plaza. So, including the commander. I mean, the officers are spending more time down there in the plaza doing reports on their computer that are in their car, rather than coming back to the station. It's been a real effort of ours to try to keep our officers out of the station, minimize the amount of time they've got to spend at the station. We want the presence in the community, as I think everyone here wants. We want the same thing. So we're looking at the processes we're involved in, trying to sort of tweak the process to minimize the amount of time we have to spend at the station. So those are some of the things we're doing. But as I said, in terms of enforcement of many of the laws, our authority is limited by statute. Trust me, we share your frustration. One of the offenses that we respond to fairly regularly, I think the numbers may have been up there, but we're looking at larcenies from vehicles. The numbers are high. 87% of those offenses, of those crimes, are cars that have not been locked, right? But even when we respond and we catch someone on someone's property even in someone's car. There are some times that we can't do anything. And in that, we share your frustration. And again, as I said, as I said, our authority is limited by legislation, okay? So, in this particular case, and this is a real case, we responded to a call, someone who had a Ring camera, and said, hey, I've got someone in my car's parked in my driveway, someone is in my car right now. We responded, we actually found the person in the car. In terms of a criminal offense, what could we charge that person with? And the answer is nothing. Nothing had been taken yet. The person had not been told they couldn't be on that person's property, and the property wasn't posted. So that is the statute, okay? In order for us to charge someone with an unlawful trespass, the person has to have been communicated not to be on the property, or the property had to be posted. Neither one of those two existed. In terms of potential arson, nothing had been taken at that point. There was nothing we could do. As I said, we share your frustration, but that's the statute, and that's what we're bound by. That's what dictates our authority, okay? So, as the senator said early on, that's where the legislature needs to come in. You know, in other settings, we've asked the legislators to consider the impact their decisions have on our ability to provide a safe community. And this is, I think, one of those areas where we have the inability to do that. Another example, you know, I think you saw the numbers, you may have seen the numbers for our retail thefts, which are very high. Now, typically what happens is someone comes into a retail establishment and they commit a retail theft, and so they're given a no trespass order, can't come back in the store. Sometimes the next day, that person's back in the store and they're shoplifting, okay? So now we have an unlawful trespass because it has been communicated to them that they can't be there. So now we have an unlawful trespass and a retail theft, two fairly low-level, non-violent misdemeanors, okay? So, again, fairly limited as to what we can do. We can cite that person, essentially. The next day, they come and do the same thing, and we have another unlawful trespass and another retail theft. Those things never escalate. They never escalate, okay? So they always stay misdemeanors. As I said, our authority is somewhat limited. So those are the other things that potentially could be addressed through the legislature. But if that doesn't happen, our authority is limited. So we share your frustration, but we are out there, with whatever tools we have in the toolbox, we are trying to use. And that's the message I really want to get to everyone. Rather than, you know, casting blame, I want to at least explain the limits of our authority and why we do what we do. We're not perfect, but we absolutely try to provide the best outcome we possibly can with public safety in mind.
Thank you, Chief. So I want to move the microphone down to Representative Burdett, who had texted me about the car entry law, and what are we doing on that, Tom?
Thank you, Senator. I think it's as crazy as anybody does that somebody getting into my car without permission is not against the law, but it's not. If there's not a law written on the books, you can't charge it. And actually, I have it in my notes right here to bring forth just that law. To make it illegal to get into somebody's car. And I've talked to one person that happened to that kind of got this started for me is a detective for the Vermont State Police, who I know very well. Gave me a call one day and said, 3 o'clock this morning, while he was up in northern Vermont investigating a murder, his wife called him, or his phone called him, and his ring showed somebody getting into his car at his house. And he didn't know, so of course he called who he knows down in this area, and they didn't get the guy, but through the course of, of the investigation or whatever, he found out that it's not breaking the law. So anyway, he called me, and we're going to try to get it on the books. I've talked to a few people already. People are on board with it, And I mentioned it to Senator Collmore that we're potentially going to have what we call a companion bill. And a companion bill is basically, we introduced the same bill in the House and Senate. So the House can work on it at the same time as the Senate, and it kind of pushes things along. So keep your fingers.
What's the timeframe that ends up?
We don't even start until the first Wednesday of January. So we've been forever without it. So we're going to potentially have to go a few more months. We have no choice. We're not in session, and hopefully we can get it done in the first month of the session.
Thank you, Tom. The next question is for Matt Prouty. How can the state lend additional public safety support to our city and police department as crime rates continue to increase while the court systems continue to be backed up?
Well, one of the things I'd like to see is the state to be a little bit creative with time management. We've often talked about night court. Look, I understand that Ian could probably answer this better than I, but I think at one point in time there were 2,000 cases in the hole from COVID. And what happens is when we have cases that are out there that aren't being adjudicated and things are piling up, nothing ever comes to fruition, right? And it's really frustrating when you have these cases that are out there for, a year or 2 years. In fact, some even up to 4, I believe. I mean, we have an officer that was assaulted by someone we're waiting on competency, but that's been over 2 years. And there are cases that still haven't been, where competency hasn't been found by this particular offender that are actually 4 years old. These are things that, as in our community, we have to ask more from the state. That's not reasonable. In fact, it's completely unreasonable. And this community deserves better there. Thanks. There's something that we did earlier in my career here at the PD in Project Vision, and I would love for us to collaborate again. It kind of went away, but CCOs are probation officers that are assigned to police departments. Some people in the supervised community couldn't stand it, but we were so effective. I'll tell you a quick story. I'm driving down Merchants Row and a guy's waving to me. And so I waved back, and the community corrections officer in the passenger seat says, "That guy's not supposed to be here. He's from Addison, pull over." I didn't know that, right? But he did. And there was one day that we just had to keep pulling over because as we heard radio traffic, the probation officer said, "Wait a minute, I got to go call so-and-so. This person shouldn't be here." So there's all these rules that that we didn't even know were being violated, but the probation officer did. So us being in the same space on this public safety model, because we're dealing with the same population, we were far more efficient. Things were being dealt with. And interestingly enough, there came a point where driving around with this corrections staff, I couldn't find a violation. And we're like, well, we got to get to the bottom of this. This isn't right. So we went and knocked on some doors to some folks that were on furlough. I'm like, hey, we can't find anybody. What's going on? He said, well, earlier today, I drove by the cop shop. I saw Corey's car in the parking lot, so we called everybody. So he has to go home. They're riding together again. So that was just a tiny little way in our 5 square miles that we could ensure that people were being compliant. We built some relationships. I actually bolstered the position of the CCO because he had the police with him, and he had far more compliance. And for me, I was able to build some relationships with the supervised community that, hey, I'm not just out here trying to put you in jail. I want you to be successful. But there's also, like, you can't violate the rules. They matter. And when people are serving sentence in community, I think citizens expect that those rules are going to be followed. So I think that's something that we could get back to. It didn't cost us any money. We're all working out of our budgets, right? We're not adding additional staff. It was just another way to do something that was far more effective. It built a relationship between the organizations, and I think that we had better outcomes in town.
Thank you, Matt. You can pass this down to Ian if you would. So for Ian Sullivan, our Rutland County State's Attorney, what measures are being taken to ensure that the local prosecutor's office has the necessary resources and support to to effectively handle the increasing caseload resulting from the rise in crime rates?
Sure. So our office, we are responsible largely for prosecuting any crime that happens within Rutland County. There are other prosecuting agencies that can prosecute crimes as well, the Attorney General's office and the U.S. Attorney's office. Fortunately, there are opportunities to collaborate with our partners in the U.S. Attorney's office on things like gun crimes. In Vermont, a prohibited person possessing a firearm when they're not supposed to, a violent felon. Somebody who's been convicted of aggravated assault, assault and robbery, but they've got a gun. In Vermont, that's a misdemeanor. In federal court, it's a very serious felony, and they have the ability to try to hold somebody where we don't even have that ability. So we're very thankful for the ability to collaborate with them, but our office, just like the Department of Corrections, just like the police, just like the state police, has suffered staffing shortages at the very same time that we are seeing an influx of new cases and while we are catching up to a backlog of cases from COVID. We did not like it, but the reality was that from 2020 up until September of 2022, the courts were operating on a very restricted model, and for a while, jury trials weren't even happening. And jury trials are the bedrock of what we do. They are the bedrock of what we do. In this country, no one can be convicted unless they plead guilty or we prove that they committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. If we aren't having jury trials or we aren't having enough jury trials, the risk of being convicted goes down. The people see further and further horizons for when that accountability may happen, and we end up with those situations where accountability might happen 4 years later. And think about what can happen in 4 years. Witnesses can move away, they can develop health issues, they might no longer be in a place to participate, and when that happens, it robs all of us, not just victims, but the entire community of real justice in our cases. So trying to work through that backlog and getting to a place where the moment of accountability happens quicker is one of the things that I think is most important for us to improve our public safety responses to these crimes.
Thanks, Ian. And you can pass it down to Al. I want to call on Al Cormier, the Chief of Operations for the Vermont Department of Corrections. How is the state government planning to allocate resources to improve the coordination between the Department of Corrections and Health and Human Services to provide comprehensive rehab programs for offenders?
Great. Thank you. So the Department of Corrections, I want to first comment on Commander Prouty's statement around the work with Rutland PD. That was an important relationship for us, and it's something that we're working towards reintegrating again. And I know we have an open line of communication with your office. Our staffing challenges, COVID, we're starting to stand up those resources again and going to a second shift. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue to build that relationship and get back to something that we were familiar with in the past. So the state and working with law enforcement and working to reduce some of the recidivism and the healthcare issues and the substance abuse issues, the AHS Mobile Crisis Team is a resource through the Agency of Human Services that assists when there's a significant event in a community. That's a resource that rolls out with mental health resources, substance use resources to help that population that's affected by that significant event. So that's one way that we're doing that. Corrections in general, we're working closely with Turning Point. We're getting recovery coaches into all of our correctional facilities right now. They're in 3 of the 6. We're continuing to expand that model. What that will do, that will help reintegrate offenders and incarcerated individuals back into the community with a mentorship partner, somebody that's experienced substance use in the past, that is now successful in their rehabilitation and getting them back into the community successfully. We have a seat at the treatment court. Treatment court is a great way for us to help reduce the challenges of substance use from a non-crime perspective, working with them getting resources wrapped around with some of the designated agencies in the area. We're focusing on a complex care model, which is a forensic accountability care team. We're piloting this in Burlington right now, but we expect to expand that out to the rest of our probation and parole offices throughout the state in the coming months. There's a lot going on. Our MAT program, the medically assisted treatment program, well, I know that gets sometimes a bad rap. The success that we've seen in our correctional facilities, one of the first in the nation to implement a medically assisted treatment program, we're seeing that success. We're seeing that continuation of care when those individuals are released, that they're connected with an agency on the outside to help them continue with that treatment and that medication. So we're seeing success in that, and we're seeing lower recidivism rates as a result of the programming we're doing inside of our correctional facilities.
More drugs inside our jails and the streets. What are we doing to stop inmates and correctional officers from bringing it into our jails?
There's a lot going on to keep that from happening. I mean, our staff are very diligent. Well, there are overdoses, and a lot of those have resulted from people that have come in as a detainee, using in the community, not necessarily using in the correctional facilities. But it's something that we're...
Okay.
So I will say, I'll finish this up by saying that there are a lot of programs happening across the HS, a lot of programs happening within the Department of Corrections to assist in this problem.
Thank you, Al. I want to correct something, an oversight on my part. When I made the introductions, Jenny Samuelson is here from the Agency of Human Services, our secretary of the agency, so my apologies for not recognizing you earlier. And I do note, I believe, I can see through the lights here, that former police chief in Rutland and former commissioner of the Department of Corrections, Jim Baker, has also joined us tonight, so thank you very much. So we want to get that microphone back to the chief here. And I'll ask him, and you've mentioned the legislative challenges, and I think I made my position pretty clear at the outset that I don't blame, well, there may be some blame on the part of a lot of different people, but the major blame, in my view, is on the legislature, and we need to really work hard to fix that. But beyond the legislative challenges, Chief, how about some other things that are faced by law enforcement agencies in enforcing the laws effectively, and what measures are you taking to address those challenges?
Well, first,
Maybe you can move that other
There we go.
microphone. There we go.
First, what are we doing to address these challenges is a forum like this, to make it abundantly clear to our legislators that our hands are tied often, that we lack the tools in the toolbox to sufficiently provide a level of public safety that I think our community deserves. And what creates that? Again, it's the laws that are on the books. I must say, I had a conversation one time with a prosecutor in an adjoining state, and we were talking about a drug task force, and the difficulty this county had with their drug task force. Whenever they try to set up a drug deal with an informant targeting a particular drug dealer, typically the dealer would say, "I'll meet you in Vermont," because of the issues that we're talking about. The sense that there's not a lot of accountability for criminal conduct. And again, I say that only because that was an actual conversation that took place. And that's the difficulty, as I said, adjoining states have. The difficulty we have is that activity is coming to us. And we lack the resources to sufficiently address those issues sometimes. Some of the other difficulty, we were talking about this earlier, but COVID, the COVID restrictions put in place in the court system was necessary, again, but it really set us back. It really set us back. So, you heard about the backlog of cases. That's been a real challenge. And hopefully we'll, again, it's continues to be a challenge for us. I mentioned about some of the challenges with the limitations on what we can do with some of the trespassing issues and the retail thefts and which don't get enhanced. I mean, I've seen other places where the example I gave earlier, where someone commits a retail theft after having been issued a no trespass order, they come back to that same store and do the same thing again. As I said, we will have 2 more misdemeanors, but I've seen elsewhere where that becomes a burglary. They've entered unlawfully and they committed a crime. That becomes a burglary. And I'm not saying it needs to become that felony because we want to incarcerate someone necessarily, but it gives us more options. It gives us more options. Now again, those options potentially cost money, but what's the cost for not spending the money? The cost then is, I think the community bears the cost of not having the ability to keeping certain individuals out of jail. So there is a real cost. It's sometimes difficult to quantify, but there's a real cost for not doing some of those things, not having the tools at least to be able to avail yourselves of. So that's the difficulty. Again, the question about prevention. Their treatment is a big part of what we need to focus on. It really is. I think it was about a year ago. The hospital, I think it was the subcommittee on Project Vision that hosted a speaker who's written a book and did a presentation and talked about the difficulty with treatment. And her daughter had been in rehab 40 times. 40 times. So it's something that's incredibly difficult. It takes money, it takes time, but we can't give up on it. We can't give up on it. I think we lose the ability to compel people into treatment when they don't want to do it. We lose the ability when we lack the ability to be involved in their rehab, whether that be through the judiciary, whether that be having someone incarcerated and required to participate in certain programs. I mean, I think there's so much more. You talked about your MAT programs in jail. I don't know beyond that that there are any clinical treatment programs in correctional facilities, and I think that's something that needs to be explored, because I don't know that despite the success that one particular program has had, I don't know that there's enough being offered in correctional facilities to really have an impact to better position those who are incarcerated to come out and be a productive member of the community. So again, I think there's a lot more that we can explore, a lot more that needs to be discussed. Everything we talk about costs money. As I said though, not spending the money has a real impact on local communities.
Thank you, Chief. The mayor, are you going to use city departments to enforce laws on health, fire, and building codes?
Yeah, so this is actually, again, something that we've been working on recently. There are currently 2 nominations sitting with the Board of Aldermen on a Monday night. They'll be voting on those nominations to reconstitute the Board of Health. And what the Board of Health does, so some of the challenges that you're hearing tonight is a lot of what Rutland has for the tools in the toolbox, as Chief says, are limited because they're dictated by law. So one of the things that our charter does give us permission on is the authority of the Board of Health to essentially be able to go in and hold landlords and businesses accountable to keep their facilities up. And what you find is a lot of these absent landlords that are not present are where these crimes are taking place, where transactions are taking place for drugs. So our Board of Health in the hotels are definitely on the list of inspections, and we do that today. Actually, we go in with our health inspector and our fire inspectors today, but we do have limited ability to do things until this Board of Health is in place. And when that Board of Health is in place, they can actually tell our health inspector, go ahead and hold these landlords, hold these property owners accountable. So that's a big piece of what we're going to be doing.
I know you mentioned earlier, Mr. Mayor, is there anything being done to recruit more officers, maybe some new incentives and pay increases? I think you touched on that.
Yeah, so I did. I touched on it during the presentation, but the chief and his team have been working on all sorts of recruitment efforts. One of the things to think about is we have to be competitive with other departments throughout the state to bring in officers, both new officers that haven't been certified yet, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chief, but new officers that haven't been certified yet, but other level 3 officers that are in other communities. So if you think about it, if we're not competitive on the pay scale, if we're not competitive on the benefits, that officer can look to another community, look for a position that's available, and trust me, there are plenty of communities looking for officers right now, and if their benefits and their package is better, they may go there. So we have to take that step to ensure that we're bringing people here, and we've been working really hard to do that, and I think we're going to see some changes in the next few weeks too.
So, you know, the pool of individuals interested in a career in law enforcement was once vast. It isn't. It's a puddle. It's a puddle, unfortunately. And so we've got to be a little more creative. We've got to sort of identify, you know, what will attract individuals to a career, not just in law enforcement, but Rutland City Police Department. And so, you know, the mayor mentioned the budget. You know, our recruitment budget up until this fiscal year was about roughly $8,000. That my request that the mayor's putting forward to the board is $40,000. It's a significant increase, but we're looking to do some things to attract individuals that are interested in working not just in law enforcement, but in the city of Rutland. Again, to be you know, as I said, the pool is so small now. We really have to stick out, and this is, you know, a credit to our recruitment team who had gone to some training and took this back. The trainer had conducted an exercise and had people from across the country on this virtual training sort of list the benefits that each agency offered, and really across the country was the same. Everyone offered the same things, right? It was, you know, it was a pension, it was health insurance, it was life insurance, it was all those sorts of things. And the point of the exercise was that you've got to stick out because it is so competitive now. With such a small pool of individuals interested in this work, you've really got to stick out. So some of the things that we're doing as a result of that, you know, we're offering gym memberships to really kind of the premier gym in the area. We're offering ski passes to Killington for our sworn members, trying to attract individuals that other agencies don't attract, and doing some other things too that we'll announce going forward.
Thank you. So the next question, I'll just open it up to anybody on the panel, by the way, including our legislators. What are the best practices for citizens to help prevent the rise of crime in the city? Anybody has a specific idea about how citizens can get involved and help in the effort? From the panel, please.
Well, let me just start with this. So I mentioned our car larcenies from vehicles, and I looked at the stat study. 87% of our larcenies from vehicles were cars that were not locked. Okay, so most of what's occurring is because the cars aren't locked. So one very simple thing. Look, we can't address the questions if there's going to be chaos out there. So let me address the question. As I said, so that's one thing that the public can do. I ask the public to lock their cars because typically if the car is locked, that person's not going to be victimized. There are going to be people out there looking to break into a car, looking to access a vehicle. If the car is locked, our data shows that typically they're moving on to the next car, that if your car is locked, they're moving on to the next car that might be unlocked. So that's one very simple thing. The other important thing is to be eyes and ears and not to confront an individual and become a victim yourself, okay? So that's my suggestion. Be our eyes and ears. Mayor talked about a neighborhood watch, and that's essentially what neighborhood watch is. Be our eyes and ears and call us.
We call you and you don't come.
Okay.
You don't come, you don't even show up.
Anybody else have an idea about involving the citizens?
We can just stop paying taxes.
Let's move on then to Ian Sullivan. How are the current policies and practices within the criminal justice system being reassessed? And what steps are being taken to ensure that these policy changes are aligned with the needs of our community?
So I apologize in advance. This is going to be a little technical, but I think it's an important feature that sometimes gets glossed over in our conversations about public safety. Back in 2018, Vermont was in line in relying on constitutional limits for the imposition of bail. I'll break that down. Both the Vermont and the federal Constitution have limitations against excessive bail. In both constitutions, that has been interpreted to mean you have to show up. Bail can only be imposed to ensure that a person shows up. Bail cannot be imposed to punish. It cannot be imposed for public safety. In 2018, we had limitations on bail imposed. One of them, and I suspect many of you have heard this, that there's $200 bail, right? You've all heard that, yes? 100 times, right? There's a reason. The reason is that in 2018, that became the cap on bail. We could not lawfully impose more than $200 bail for a large number of misdemeanor offenses, including retail theft, including unlawful trespass, the things that get these folks called to the plaza time after time, day after day, week in and week out. And even when the people that they cited to court don't show up and an arrest warrant issues, the bail attached to that arrest warrant is capped at $200. And when they're brought back to court on that arrest warrant, the analysis has changed for a judge by statute. It has changed from, is this person a risk of failing to appear again, to, is this person a risk of fleeing from prosecution? And I think the best way to understand that is with a hypothetical example. If John Doe has lived his entire life here in Rutland and hasn't showed up at court 4 times, 4 failures to appear, and each time he's been picked up walking on the streets in a scenario like what Commander Prouty described, he's never actually fled, but boy is he a risk of not showing up. Under the old law, there was a strong argument to impose bail. Under the new law, that argument is weaker and weaker. That's a change we've experienced since 2018, and it's important for all of you to know that when the legislator takes back up this session, they will be considering S27. It's already gotten through the Senate, that would even further limit the ability of the courts to impose bail in response to criminal conduct and failures to appear. If that is something that you feel strongly about, you should contact your representatives and let them know. That is a systematic change that I have experienced. We see it play in and day out, and it is an especially pronounced challenge when we are already looking at long times to trial. Quite frankly, it makes it very difficult if the person isn't willingly showing up to be prosecuted. And I don't believe that we can live in a society where our laws are only enforced against the people who are willing to have them enforced against them.
Repeal the 2018 law. Governor, would you support that?
Okay, we need to get back to our, and I'll just echo what Ian's saying, and this is from the one of the associate justices on the Supreme Court, and I just want to read this because I think there is a misunderstanding between bail and conditions of release. They're 2 separate issues. Vermont differs in its bail laws from most states. The imposition of bail is permissible in this state only when conditions of release will not adequately address risk of flight or non-appearance. Bail cannot be ordered in Vermont courts solely because the defendant is charged with a serious offense or because a defendant poses a risk of danger to the community. That's in our Constitution. So in order to change that, we would need to introduce an amendment to the Constitution. It's a 4-year process that goes through both the House and the Senate twice, and then is signed into law by the governor. So that is really a challenge to get done. The conditions of release is a statute. That could be changed as soon as we get back to Montpelier. And I'm going to move along to the legislators here in a second because a lot of them have some ideas about bills they would like to introduce. But I think everybody that's here tonight understands everyone on this panel shares your concern and shares your desire to make people accountable. It's just how we get there. And one of the ways we can't do it because of our Constitution is the bail. So we can change conditions of release, and I'm hoping we can do that. I'm hoping it'll be a tripartisan effort when we reconvene in January. So I thought I'd mention that, and I appreciate your bringing that up, Ian, because it is true. And again, I think most people assume bail is the same thing as conditions of release, but they're not. I've got another question that I'll just throw out to everybody, and anybody can take a shot at it. What do you recommend for business owners when their employees don't feel safe working after dark or working shifts alone. Anybody want to take a crack at that? Legislators included, if you have an idea. If you run a business, what could we do to make it safer for your employees? Do they leave in pairs? Do they? Well,
Carry a gun.
why don't you move that microphone down? Or Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, so, so there are principles of crime prevention through environmental design that are advisable here. And, one of those things obviously is lighting. And so increased lighting certainly helps. The other is adjust staffing. At particular hours, it would make sense potentially not to have just one employee working, but at least two. So those are, again, certainly has an impact on the bottom line for the business, but it absolutely enhances the safety of employees. So those are just a couple things that I think are pretty straightforward.
Does it take some of the tax money to get paid?
Yeah.
To them?
Thank you. Here in the city, whether your business is downtown or it's outside, one of the things that we keep hearing, and I just want to touch back on this, and Chief had mentioned it, is that it's really dark. People don't feel safe. And I know that seems simple, but it is. That darkness, you can't see what's coming around the corner, you don't know what's behind you. Being able to have a visual line of sight from the building to your vehicle to know that you're safe on that process walking there, it's really important. So Chief mentioned lighting, it's something that we've been talking about as well. Increasing the street lighting can certainly save some, make people feel a little bit safer, and we can put an effort into that too. So.
Okay. Anyone else have an idea on the panel? Let me move down to the legislature if I could. If you could just move the microphone down there. And I've got 2 or 3 questions, but I think it might be more useful to hear from each of you. I know, for instance, Representative Knott mentioned that there are some bills already on the wall, which means they've been introduced in the House Judiciary Committee, and maybe some that will be introduced in the upcoming session that address the issue of public safety. Will?
Thank you. So, there's a couple of bills that I know House Judiciary Committee will be taking up at the immediate start of the 2024 session, the first week of January. And both of the ones that I'm going to talk about involve the backlog in our courts. And the first is in regards to judicial appointments. Vermont currently has 7 judicial openings, including 1 in Rutland. This contributes to the backlog. And what the legislature is hoping to do is work in partnership with the governor's administration to streamline the process for judicial nomination. There's a nonpartisan committee that makes recommendations to the governor in regards to people to fill the empty judicial slots. I know that some names were submitted to the governor in December and some additional names in August. And we still have these openings. And it's a huge responsibility to make these appointments on the governor's part. Judges are only reviewed once every 6 years. It's very unusual for a judge to be removed from office. It is, in a lot of ways, a lifetime appointment. And it's one of the most important things a governor can do is to put someone in our courts for potentially decades. So what we can't have, what we have now and what is not working is when we give names to the governor and perhaps he feels it's not the right person for the job at this time. Maybe there's circumstances of the person changed over the course of the extensive review process. Those positions are staying open for too long. So we're hoping at the start of the legislative session to look at the nomination process so that when the governor has names that do not work for him, we can very nimbly, very quickly submit more names so that judicial appointments are filled quicker. So that's something that House Judiciary is going to work on. I hope we're doing it in full partnership with the governor's administration so that we can come up with a system where openings in our courts are filled quicker and that the backlog is therefore addressed quicker. So that's one thing that we'll be working on. And the second one I want to mention, and it's tied very directly to comments that the police chief made previously, and it's something based on conversations I've had in past years and something I've pushed before, which is we are going to take up a bill on the first week of session that looks at the backlog in the court. As everyone in this room knows, there are people who have 4, 5, 6, 7 court appearances. And quite often, with the backlog we have, someone is arrested, they're given a court date, and they commit and are charged with 7, 8 more offenses before they even make it to the court the first time. So they're misdemeanor charges. They are, in effect, slaps on the wrist. So what we are going to look at is a bill that would combine misdemeanor charges that are combine misdemeanor charges over the period of X amount of time, and if they reach that threshold, they'll become a felony. So that addresses the issue in 2 ways. It checks off, I think, 2 very important boxes. First off, someone who is found guilty of these crimes is held more accountable. It's a felony charge now. It's not just a series of misdemeanors. So that's 1. And then 2, it addresses our court backlog. Because if someone has 8, 9 misdemeanor charges and that's consolidated into 1 felony charge, that frees up a lot of court time. So that's something I feel strongly about. I've advocated for a while, and I'm really looking forward to getting that one on the books as soon as possible.
Representative Burdick.
Thank you. And the bill that Will was just talking about is an excellent bill and an excellent idea. And there's a lot of people that are supporting it, no matter the party lines, and which is what it's going to take to really get things done that we want to get done. But kind of backtracking a little bit to the conditions of release that Senator Collmore was talking about. This summer, I called up to Montpelier, up to what we call our legislative council. That's the lawyers in Montpelier that write the bills for us, and told them we need to do something with bail. And I found out, like a lot of people might have even found out tonight, we really can't do anything with bail unless we amend the Constitution, which takes 4 or 5 years. Anyway, talking to the Ledge Council, he came up with the idea of the conditions of release. And unbeknownst to me, Senator Collmore was working on the same thing. And just because we know each other pretty well and we communicate, we found out that we were working on the same thing. So we kind of combined our efforts and are going to have not a single bill. There'll be 2 bills, but they'll be identical in their language, one in the House and one in the Senate. Like I mentioned earlier, it can help expedite the process a little bit, and hopefully that happens. Something else that I've been working on, H312. It's a bill we worked on last year. Myself, Ken Goslant from Northfield, and Tom Oliver from Franklin County. We worked closely with Jay Johnson, the counsel to the governor, who's here with the governor. I call it a criminal justice bill. It's a 35-page bill with 10 sections in it. And I talked to people about moving it, and I was told with a chuckle, not a chance. And that's the way it works sometimes. Well, there is a chance. And with everything that's going on, I think that's our chance. And another little chance that's in that bill, a few things that are in it is criminal procedures, juvenile proceedings, competency, regulated drugs. There's some firearms and possession in relation to drug sales, and then some enhanced fentanyl laws. And I found out a few weeks ago that Senator from Bennington County, I'm assuming he read my bill, and he pulled out the enhanced fentanyl piece, and all of a sudden it's a good idea. I mean, probably everybody's had that situation when it becomes somebody else's idea, it's a good idea. You know what, as long as it moves forward, I'm happy with that. And if that fentanyl piece moves along, that will definitely be a good thing. Because right now, if somebody gets charged with a heroin say a heroin charge, and it turns out there's fentanyl in it, they can't be charged with distributing fentanyl. And what the law will do is that will open it up to anything that may be in a drug, they can be charged with it. The only other thing that I had a few minutes ago was talked about our trespass laws. Now, as far as I know, the trespass laws, you can get up to 3 months and a $500 fine or both. And I don't know how, what I'm going to do in the coming weeks is I'm going to contact our state's attorney, Ian Sullivan, and try to find out what we can do around those trespass laws to enforce them. Maybe there's some language changes that has to be done that is probably above my pay grade, but I certainly know people whose pay grade covers things like that. And if we can, because right now, I mean, it's talked about. I mean, people go into a store, they take something. There's trespass orders filed against them, and they're back the next day. And not only, maybe some enhanced trespass laws, but those laws will also, or those violations would also go along with what Representative Knott was talking about. Once you get multiple misdemeanors, that you can be charged with a felony. But I mean, you heard it, that the weight of this is on us. The Senator, us three here, Senator Williams, there's a number of reps and senators in the audience. It's no fault of the judges, it's no fault of the law enforcement, corrections, the state's attorney. The whole weight is on us, plain and simple. A lot of us that are up there may or may not have been in Montpelier when a lot of these laws were passed, when a lot of this stuff was happening, which the pendulum has gone too far as far as, some compassion goes. Compassion is a good thing. Some people deserve it, some people don't. Some people... And we have to bring that pendulum back a little bit to keep our streets safe, to keep people safe that are leaving work in the dark, that are fearful of that. But again, hopefully in the coming months, in our legislative session, we can get some of these things passed and cure some of these problems.
When are the hotels closing?
Senator Williams.
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm not in the Judiciary Committee. I'm on the Health and Welfare and Education, and they're both very important committees. But I'm thinking back to my high school civics days when they represented the government of the United States as a stool. They had 3 legs. One of them was the executive, one of them was judicial, and the other was the legislative. But our stool actually has a 4th leg, and that's called We the People. Yeah. And anybody in this audience or in this county has the authority and the responsibility. If they see something, they should say something. But also, anybody can come to me or any of these other legislators here and say, I want you to present a bill for me, and you can tell us what you want in it. We'll go to Legislative Council, and they'll tell us what we can do legally and what we can't do. But that's going to require a little bit of work on We the People, because you're going to have to stay informed about the legislation that's coming. And I see the legislation that's coming, this S-27 bill, right now has already gone through the Senate and is sitting on the wall in the House Judiciary. I don't support that bill, but we need to go back through and look at what's hanging on the wall that's going to be enacted in the next year. And I think some of that is going to change based on what's going on in this country and what's going on in this state. So anybody who wants anything from me, send me an email or give me a call, and I'd be glad to sit down and talk to you about it. And I've got 3 bills in for this next coming session, and I've got 2 from the previous. So I know the process, and I work for you. We all work for you.
Thank you, Senator. Just to highlight that bill, and I think Ian mentioned that bill as well, S-27, and it did pass the Senate. I didn't vote for it, but it did pass. It's known as the no cash bail law, I believe.
Oh, not probably.
So it will open up even more problems, to my way of thinking, if we don't have the ability to impose any cash bail for any reason. And I think Ian's already made that point. Let's go back to the panel if I could. Al Cormier, you're up. Are the current rules that our parole officers follow strong enough to keep violent offenders under the proper observation?
Easy answer is yes.
The easy answer is yes.
Okay.
I do believe that the rules that we have in place through our policies, through our directives, through our legislative laws, statutes, do give our parole officers what they need to adequately do their job. We've seen the Crime Research Group recently conducted a study over a 3-year period of our risk intervention services. I know the chief had mentioned he wasn't sure what other programs we offer, but we do offer a lot of other programs besides the MAT. And our risk reduction programming has shown a decrease of our recidivism rates for those leaving correctional facilities drop from 44% to 23%. That's a drastic decrease, cutting our recidivism rates in half based on the programming that we're providing inside of our correctional facilities. What that translates to is improved reentry success. The probation and parole officers, the community correctional officers that we have the tools, again, through statute, through directive, through our work with the Council of State Governments and our Justice Reinvestment Acts. I believe it's working and it's effective in giving them the tools they need.
Thanks, Al. Matt Prouty.
Actually, do you mind if I?
No, go ahead, Ian, please.
So, I hear what you're saying, I do, but I disagree, at least on one point. Vermont, unlike a lot of jurisdictions, has what's called indeterminate sentencing, meaning our jail sentences have a minimum and maximum sentence. A person might get sentenced to 1 to 2 years to serve. There's a range there. During that range, a person might be serving a jail sentence in the community, which every time I explain that to people, they are doing linguistic gymnastics, right? A jail sentence in the community. Community supervision can be a good thing. Somewhat recently, the legislature first took away and then reinstituted a watered down version of escape from community supervision. If people are allowed to serve jail sentences in the community, absconding, fleeing from that sentence, from my perspective, that should be a crime. If it's not a crime, they can't possibly do their jobs.
Okay, Matt, I know you talked about this a little bit earlier. What role does community policing play in the overall strategy for crime prevention and public safety? How's the local police department engaging with the community to build trust and foster a sense of security? And you, of course, are the main man behind Project Vision, and we all applaud that and appreciate your efforts therein.
So one of the things that we're doing, so coming back after being retired for a year, went traveling, anyway, got bored, minding my own business, and the chief said, hey, what are you doing next week? So here I am. Anyway, on the vision side, coming back after COVID, man, that really hurt us. Organizationally and with our partners, a lot of organizations sort of, retreated to their silos with remote work, and we just weren't communicating well. The other thing that I saw is we were focused on, maybe not when I say we, in the greater vision piece, we were focused on things that weren't addressing immediate issues. And, listen, when people are dying, in an ER, we're not worried about their hangnail, okay? You're trying to save lives. So, yeah, I felt like, we're trying to do LASIK surgery when someone has a sucking chest wound here, and this is stupid. So we had to back up a little bit, and we need to focus on life-saving stuff from a police department level. And look, I see a lot of stuff on social media, things like that. preservation of life isn't your number one priority, I don't want you in public safety, okay? I don't care how you feel about the individual, whatever, we're gonna try to save lives. So that had to be paramount. And then we needed a structure. So we looked at 4 things that we can do in community in falling under one of those pillars. You know, one is, you know, the prevention work. I heard that mentioned earlier. And prevention, if there's anything that has the word prevention in it, whether it's drug prevention, suicide prevention, smoking prevention, or crime prevention, we want to be part of it. Motivational interviewing was a big piece that's coming up right now when it comes to suicide prevention, the zero suicide endeavors that are going on. So we got our staff trained up in that. I learned a lot about that. And we want to do that not just organizationally as a PD, but I want to do that with my partners, the social workers that we work with, the case managers, corrections officers, whatever. And then there's the intervention piece. You know, where can we intervene? From a law enforcement perspective, you know, it's very difficult when, you know, you have 2 officers working, when we're used to 6, and our challenges have never been greater. So where can we intervene? Well, that's when we have to use our data. So we can crunch the numbers and we can look at our stuff and like, hey, here's my top 5 offenders that are creating a whole lot of chaos. Let's go make friends, right? Let's get in their business. There was times just this last couple months prior to the city shutting down like 135 Grove, I was the only one that wasn't on a call, so I parked the command post in front of the building and I started working on my email. There wasn't much that I could do there, but boy, did I saw a lot of people running around, throwing stuff out the window. And, you know. So intervention, right? And you know, where are we meeting people where they're at? We just instituted our community outreach, our outreach care team. I'm partnered with the Free Clinic, Turning Point, Community Care Network. We have some volunteers from the Medical Reserve Corps that are providing a clinical piece. But, you know, I have folks that are really struggling. They're street homeless, they're out there, and they're probably trespassed from the hospital based on some of their obnoxious behavior. But they have real health needs, right? So we're meeting under the River Street Bridge. We're meeting down on other parts of the city. And it gives us an opportunity to have interactions where folks aren't at a place of advantage or disadvantage from a public safety perspective, but we can offer like, hey, can I help you meet this need? Whether it's your COPD, whether it's all these other things, get a quick health assessment, maybe even get folks into primary care. Those are those interventions. Sometimes when you meet one need with an individual, on the police department side, that takes a whole bunch of calls off of our call volume, right? If I can get one individual into treatment where we make the phone calls, we call in a recovery coach, we call in a couple of favors, we actually provide transport down to Serenity House, whatever. That intervention makes a big difference on the bottom line for us. So I got the prevention, the intervention, then there's the enforcement. We have to do that targeted enforcement. We're leveraging our partners with Homeland Security. We have task force officers in the PD. We're reaching out to POs. Hey, is there a lever that you can pull? Gee, there's a lever that you can pull with that person under supervision that we can change some behavior here because it's really hurting us. And then there's the last piece, and this is for all the community, support. So in one of those pillars, where do we fit in community policing, right? And sometimes the support is take on that hot mess and be a mentor, right? We all have them in our lives. They, we want to keep them out of the system. Sometimes it's a little bit more of us being a little bit more vulnerable, spending some time, being a little bit selfless and saying, hey, let me do life with you here. Maybe we can change the outcome. Doesn't always work, but being supportive of our real struggling population, oftentimes, and we definitely see it, in the PD, where we have folks that maybe we've arrested 100 times, whatever. But because of some of those efforts we're doing, where we're like, hey, when you're ready to turn it around, come on in, right? We'll make that call. We will transport you there. We will do whatever, right? It makes a big difference. So get involved. Project Vision meets the second Thursday of each month at Calvary Bible Church from noon to 1:30. We may be having some lunch. Typically we didn't, but we might have some food there. Don't count on it, but if we do, it'll be a bonus. Get involved. It's a spot where when we do it right, okay, And you learn about each other's disciplines, you learn what one organization can and can't do. You're not just assuming or reading it off of Facebook, right? You're learning what people are capable of within their organizations. You find out, oh my God, I didn't know this organization provided that service. Now I'm armed with that information, right? We build relationships. We're not in it alone. We're battling our compassion fatigue. We're recharging our batteries. These relationships make a big difference, and that math changes, and then 1 + 1 starts to equal 3. Okay, so that's what we're doing. It isn't perfect. We're gonna keep plugging away. We're not gonna solve all the world's problems, but at least we're gonna go down trying, and we're gonna do it together. So.
Thanks, man. So, a number of years ago, then Judge Francis McCaffrey and I believe Senator Peg Flory came up with the idea for what was called drug court at one point. It has since been renamed into treatment court. I'm going to pick on Ian a little bit if I could to just kind of describe what goes on there. Many of the legislators here were fortunate enough to attend the annual meeting of Turning Point. Tracy Hawk got a big award, by the way, a week or so ago, and well-deserved. And they talked a lot about that. We had Judge Valenti there with us that evening. And it sounds to me, at least, and I know the other legislators probably share this view, that it's a program that is making a difference.
Yeah, so I'll start with a broad view in prosecuting cases and prosecuting them well, which is it's important to have options. We should respond differently to a first-time offender compared to somebody who's been in and out of the system their entire lives.
What options are
That
you
should be,
giving us?
that's what I'm trying to answer. If you'll let me keep talking, I'm happy to explain what I'm talking about. So one of those options, and it's not for everyone, but it is for some people who are struggling with substance use disorder, is to engage in the treatment court. They will plead guilty, and their sentencing will depend on how they do in treatment court. Before I talk about what goes into participating in treatment court, I want to talk about why that is a meaningful tool. For those 75% of people involved in retail thefts who are known drug users, addressing the drug use stops it, right? People who have a job, who are sober, who have somewhere to be every day, and people who rely on them, those are people who stay out of the criminal justice system and live law-abiding lives. If somebody is struggling with addiction and we send them to jail for a week, a month, a year, and they come out of jail continuing to struggle with drug addiction, odds are good we will be prosecuting them again. That hasn't fixed the problem, it has just incapacitated the problem for a time. If we are successful in treatment court, it fixes the problem. And we hedge our bets. If it's not successful, they go to jail. So, when they are in treatment court, they regularly meet with a caseworker from Evergreen, a recovery program. They're connected with different community resources, and every 2 weeks, they show up before a judge and have to own up to the progress they are making on their sobriety. If they are not meeting expectations, there are a range of sanctions, everything from on the super low end, writing an essay, to the more punitive end, nights in jail. And if they don't change their behaviors, they're kicked out of the program, and the jail sentence, usually measured in years, goes into effect. So there are stark differences between success and failure, but a durable, lasting sobriety for people, in my view, is one of the best public safety outcomes we could get out of that situation.
Thank you. So we'll move down to the mayor. One of the questions that was submitted had to do with regional ambulance. And I just want you to maybe talk about the situation there. Some of the questions here, I wasn't aware that there were issues there, but maybe there are.
Yeah, so they are like everybody else, like our police department, our Department of Corrections, our state's attorney's office, struggling to find support and help. So they're understaffed. They're having a hard time getting to people. they're relying on other departments, including our fire department, and our fire chief and I talk about this very regularly. They rely on us to aid them and help them and assist them where they can. It's not for a lack of effort, and it's not for a lack of wanting to expand back to the services that they provided before, but they are seeing the same challenges, and they're also faced with the same challenges in the field that our officers are. They're faced with substance abuse problems, they're faced with struggles of having to leverage, Narcan to save a life, or every once in a while they're even having to take care of somebody who is right on the edge, and that's difficult for them too. So that goes to a mental aspect that they have to struggle with and deal with too. The conversation, is difficult, but we are looking at how we can continue to support them and get them the resources they need to restaff fully.
So we talked about treatment court just a minute ago. Al, if you're welcome to the next question. How is the state ensuring that there's a balanced approach between incarceration and treatment for individuals involved in non-violent offenses? And what resources are being considered to support the prioritized rehabilitation process?
So the MAT program is another, we mentioned that earlier. That's something that we're utilizing from incarceration to reentry. Also, for those that have not been incarcerated, that's a program through the probation and parole, whether it's furlough, probation, parole supervision. We can access those programs with those individuals to help with that. The coordinated care model that I mentioned earlier is another way we're doing that. Working with the Department of Mental Health, working with the Vermont Department of Health, coming together with a complex care team that's working with individuals that have high risks, high needs, not necessarily violent, but a lot of high need areas that we can come around and wrap those services around to help them provide a successful re-entry into the community. We're doing a lot with our transitioning folks out of an industries model in our prisons to a technical training model. That's also a way that we're helping to get people out with jobs that they're trained for. Our furniture model, we shut that down. That didn't work. It worked at a time, but there's no jobs for that. I think if we get the people trained in a technical model, whether it be electricity, heating, ventilation, those are areas where people are coming out, they're getting a job, they're having a mentor, they're being successful in those areas. So that's one way that we're looking as far as moving people out. In the community still though, the Turning Point piece, we're rapidly increasing our partnership with Turning Point. I'd mentioned that earlier as well. Those recovery coaches coming into the facilities and working with those individuals, and then working as a mentor when they're going out. Those wraparound services with our designated agency partners, also providing assistance to us. So there's a lot of resources out there, and we're working to ensure people are getting to those resources when they are out in the community.
Thanks, Al. Back to the mayor and the police chief. There was a question about bridging the communication gap between Rutland Police Department and the public, and I don't know whether there are specific examples of how we could do that. I think coming to a forum like this is one way, getting involved with Project Vision another way, and waving to police officers as you see them go by. I mean,
I think that's
people
important.
put those signs up right after our tragic loss, and I know that meant a lot to the officers that are on the force. So, that was great to see.
No, it absolutely did. It certainly helped us through the tragedy, and it's nice to still see the support out there. We mentioned, the mayor mentioned a Rutstat every other week at the station, and for those who can attend, please do so. But we'll start to put those reports on. If you go to the city's website, and there's a PD link, and we'll start to put those reports on the PD link on the city website. The police commission also meets the second Monday of every month, and there's a separate report we do for the police commission, and we'll start to put those on there too. But everyone's certainly welcome to come to the police commission meeting the second Monday of every month at 6 o'clock in the police community room at the police station. At various times, we've had Coffee with a Cop events throughout the city. So when those are advertised, I encourage you to come to those. We've had those, as I said, various locations throughout the city over the last couple of years. And again, like you said, hey, feel free to approach an officer when they're out and talk and just introduce yourself. It's, you know, typically when we're out of the car, unfortunately, we're dealing with a call that we've had to respond because someone has a particular struggle. So it's nice to be approached in sort of a different setting, just to have a conversation, introduce yourself, and but you know, again, as I said, there was another question, somewhat related, asked about reports that were press releases sort of that were no longer. We haven't stopped doing those. It's sometimes it does come down to capacity. The supervisors that we've got on each shift are essentially have in addition to the responsibilities of being supervisors, or another officer on the shift. And so we want a lot of those releases that are going out to be reviewed by our supervisor. But internally, we can talk about that to make sure you know, you're aware of kind of what we're doing. Had a conversation today with one of our community resource specialists who's really started to post a lot of things as I said, on the city's website with the PD link. And we'll start to put on there sort of a call log. So you get to see all the calls that we're responding to, maybe the street name, you know, the location, but not too much detail, but you'll get a sense of what we're responding to on a daily basis. And the other thing that we're putting on there in terms of communication is, let me back up a little bit. So a number of years ago, we started using a particular model to reduce our crime and traffic crashes called DDAX, which is a data-driven approach to crime and traffic safety. And that was a model that was really led by NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So that was a model that we started using. So we're mapping out our crime, we're mapping out our crashes, looking to see where they're occurring at the same time. We're putting resources in those areas to do high visibility traffic enforcement. And the idea behind it is that the visibility tends to reduce the crime in those areas, and the enforcement tends to reduce the crashes. During COVID, again, with the difficulties we're having with COVID, we kind of got away from that. So what we've done since is we've been deploying our traffic detection devices a little bit more. You may have seen our speed carts out there. We actually just got a grant for 2 more. We get requests for those throughout the city. And once we put those out, we're taking the data and putting the results of those placement of those devices. Starting to put those up on the website too. So you'll get a sense of what those devices are detecting. So if you're requesting one on your street, within a few days, the data, once we remove that device, the data will be up there. So you'll get to see exactly what the data showed in terms of what the speeds are. You know, again, because we'll get a complaint of speed in a particular location, and we might be there for an hour, for 2 hours, but when we're there, no one's speeding. You're there all the time, and you're going to see it. And so this really, I think, it's almost more effective in terms of narrowing down, really identifying what the speeds are all the time. And if we've got to do some enforcement at a particular time, this will tell us when we need to be there to reduce speeds at those times when they're typically faster than they should be. So again, just part of, you know, communicating sort of the results of what we're doing back to the public.
Mr. Mayor, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, Chief said a lot of what I was going to say already, but I think the desire in communication, right? There's different tiers, and this is a national issue, but small communities, they've kind of lost that real-time feedback outside of social media. And social media, there's a lot of conversations that are happening online, and what we find is sometimes there's missing information or incomplete information. So that confuses people. And again, we're talking about safety here. We're talking about feeling comfortable in our own homes, in our own communities, making sure that the right information is out there and being shared as quickly as possible. I know historically the police department's done a great job of that. And as times get tight and officers have to be out in the field, they may not be able to come back and do those updates as quickly. But when that staffing goes back up, we'll be there. The other things that we're trying to do that are a little bit less real time, though, is, you know, Chief and I have both been on your show on the radio. Radio is one of the things that's left in town that's real time, so we can go on the morning show and talk to Terry and try to get that out to you. But again, that's circumstantial. the communication among the citizens about what's happening. I think what we can do is we can help each other out a little bit. If you, like, you know, Chief said, be our eyes and ears, call the police department, but make sure that you're sharing accurate information as to not, you know, spook or scare other people. And if you can do that, we can certainly add some value to that, put information in as we get it and as it becomes available too, so.
Okay, so we have maybe 10, 12 minutes left. What I'd like to do, and I know this is not on the agenda, but I'd like to go all the way back down to Senator Williams, each of you with like a minute to 90 seconds tops, with any sort of closing remarks you want to make, and then we'll have maybe the mayor come up and make some closing remarks as well. So Senator Williams. I know I'm putting you on the spot, Terry, but you can do it.
Yeah, you got me. So, I have an opinion on everything. I think the biggest thing I can say tonight is that the police are doing the best they can with what they got. I mean, who would want to be a police officer right now? So what we need to do is give them all the support we can. And trust me, they're professionals. They know what they're doing. The legislature, on the other hand, needs to support them by doing what you want us to do. So I really don't have much more to say about it, but.
All right. Representative Burdick.
Thank you. The first thing I want to do is commend the mayor for putting this together. The old saying, going from the frying pan into the fire, he really did that tonight. He put himself out there and jumped right into the fire. This is not an easy topic. We're not going through, we're going through a tough time. And so I just wanted to commend him for doing that. But kind of touching on what Terry was just talking about as far as us legislators go. I hope everybody in here knows who their legislators are. If not, you can find out on the legislative website, the state website. Contact your legislators. If you know a legislator, I would still, that isn't your legislator or senator, I would still recommend that you contact yours. And the reason for that is you have pull, whether you realize it or not, with your legislator. You don't have much pull with somebody who's, as much pull with somebody who's not from your district. So I would really encourage you to find out who yours is. If you're in Rutland City, there's 4 in the city. I'm West Rutland, Clarendon, Wallingford, and a big section of Rutland town. If you're from those towns, feel free to contact me. You can with questions. We got the code up here where you can submit questions there. I'm going to throw the mayor under the bus and say you can call his office with questions. So he kind of did that to himself by doing this, but get your questions in. They aren't going to be answered tonight. It may be a few days or whatever. I think what you heard tonight, us as legislators and your senators, we're with you. We have bills to help alleviate some of these problems. Are they going to be cure-alls? No, they're not going to be cure-alls, but certainly, hopefully, get us started in the right direction.
Representative Knott.
Thank you. And yeah, certainly there is a lot of work to be done. And I'll say the legislature is a citizen legislature. In my other job, I manage a business in downtown Rutland. We have people that come in that are afraid to be downtown, that are concerned. That is just not acceptable for this community. It's not acceptable for the state. And we need to do things to address these situations. And we will. And Representative Burdett and I both serve in the House Judiciary Committee. We are different parties, but we work together on a basis of respect. We don't always agree on the same bills, but I respect Tom. I know he's there because he cares, and I believe he feels the same about me. We are going to work together in this legislature, and we need to get some things accomplished. We mentioned some bills that will help. And to just build on what was said before, reach out to your legislators. Send emails, make phone calls, put letters to the editor out there so to keep the conversation going. Because it's that sort of dialogue that brings ideas to the surface, that we can build upon with legislation. And we need to do more, and we are fully committed to doing so.
So you're saying
Al
that
Cormier.
officers are overworked and understaffed. If you go back and look, they were
Go
not
ahead,
overworked
Al.
and understaffed.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for being here. I think something that's important for us as the Department of Corrections, the majority of our staff in our probation and parole office here in Rutland and in our correctional facility here are also citizens and residents of Rutland. And they care about this as much as, so I want to say that our staff are as committed to this problem as you are, and they're doing what they can in their power to see solutions and help find an end to this problem as well. So I just want to give them a shout out for the work that they're doing in this area. And thank you all for being here.
Ian Sullivan.
I guess the note I would like to end on is capacity. Right now, police departments are at some of their lowest staffing levels, certainly that I can remember. We're short-staffed. I know the Department of Corrections, at least for a time, I think hopefully you're done with that, but we're ordering people in to cover shifts at the jail. And we've all seen it. We have seen people leave the profession because they were exhausted and because it was, quite frankly, just exhausting to do some of this work in a public space without support. This community, tons of support, and I have never felt like there is a lack of support for what we are trying to do to try to improve public safety in this community. But the piece of capacity that I think could change legislatively is to open up a track in our courts. And what I mean by that is, right now, any case we file goes through the same track. Whether we file a homicide or retail theft, it is the same track. They are on the same route towards jury trial if they are going to have a trial. That can mean that the retail thefts get pushed rather than getting trial dates because they are competing with an allegation of homicide, of sexual assault, of armed robbery. And understandably, those violent felonies get trial dates first. Having a separate track where we could ensure that the retail thefts, that the unlawful trespasses, that the things that make us uncomfortable when we go into our downtowns and into stores are getting addressed quickly, that there's accountability, and that the person suffers the consequence of their unlawful behavior. That's the capacity that I think would help us the most in improving public safety.
Matt Browning.
So I'm actually glad that the governor's here because in his 10-point violence reduction strategy, I'm sure that these conversations are in all the, county seats around the state. So we're not an island, okay? Around the state, these same issues are happening. So I'm hoping that these same concerns will be echoed. That's why I really appreciate him taking the time to be here. In closing remarks for me, hey, I love this town, and I know you do too. See something, say something, please call us. I heard a comment earlier that, sir, please find us after if we didn't respond. And we'll try to address that. And look, sometimes you're gonna call and the person on the other line, it might be miserable. I get it. But it's tough. That dispatch center, it doesn't stop. That phone just doesn't stop ringing. But we wanna help, we wanna be relevant, we wanna make an impact. I'm open to ideas. There's always a better way. So please come see me. Please come and see me afterwards, and I'll give matthew.proudy@vermont.gov. Or we're not scared of having hard conversations, so please reach out. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thanks, Matt. Chief Kilcullen.
So first, I want to thank all the members of the police department who are dealing with everything we talked about tonight. Day in and day out, dealing with the issues that frustrate all of us, doing their absolute best to bring a sense of public safety to our community that deserves it. How effective we are is really just a function of how active our community is, and I'm thankful for an active community. And, again, and I can't thank the community enough for all the support that we've had for quite some time. It's just amazing. As I said, we couldn't do it without the support of the community. So thank you for all that. Again, much of what we talked about tonight, we talked about the limits of our authority. We wanted to make sure, what we can do, what we can't do is abundantly clear. And I think we've, identified, it's through the legislative process that we can hopefully make some changes that will enhance the level of service we can provide. But until then, those are the rules that we play under. The other thing, thank you to all our partners here at the table, our legislators. As I said, our hope is that the messages we're trying to get through are being really sincerely considered. And Ian talked about the capacity, lack of capacity for that I think that really needs to be addressed. Other than the legislature, I think some of the other things that really impact our ability to provide, a public safety product that the community deserves is depending on our partners. And our hope is that when our partners don't, sort of assess their operation and realize that they either lack the statutory authority to adequately do their jobs, that they seek that. And the other thing too with our partners is that I hope is that they also consider the impact of administrative decisions made at the executive level, how it might impact our ability to provide public safety. We're partners, and we value your partnership, and hope those things are considered when we're looking to, as I said, when we're looking to provide a level of service that our community deserves. So,
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to have the mayor come back up to close things off. But I just want to thank folks for coming tonight. For the most part, it was unruly to a certain degree, but we kind of expected it would be. And don't feel badly about that. I think it tells us how passionate you all are and how much you care about things. So if you spoke out and we heard you, and if you did keep quiet, I appreciate that too. But I think it went well, and we hope to do this again. So I'll let the mayor finish it.
So first off, thank you, Senator Brian Collmore, for hosting. I called him, I think, this week and asked him if he would do this. So he stepped up quickly, and he did an excellent job. So thank you very much, Brian. Really appreciate it. So it's interesting being in this position and watching this community struggle with these areas. I'll say this. I am not the expert on public safety, but that is why I tried to bring this crew together tonight. That is why I've invited our state officials down to sit here, to listen to our challenges, and to understand what we're facing. I've said it before, I've said it a couple times. If in the city of Rutland, I could hire a judge, hire a prosecutor, put together a correctional facility and a treatment facility, I would do that tomorrow based on the concern that I hear in my community. But the state doesn't grant us that charter. It doesn't give us that mandate. So we have to leverage the resources that we have at our disposal, and those resources are here tonight and hopefully listening throughout the rest of the state. Chief said it really well once in a talk that he gave, that it's not just the people that are here, it's the people that aren't here that need to listen as well. Our laws aren't just made by the representatives here in Rutland, they're made throughout the state, through other legislators and other representatives as well. Write to your legislators here, but feel free to write to them as well. Have those conversations with them as well, because they're the ones that can help make and impact the changes that we see here in our city. I'm with Brian. I appreciate the passion that you all have and the reason that you're here. I want to be receptive to that, and I want to be able to take that on. Someone earlier tonight said they tried to reach out to me and didn't get a response back. I apologize. It's a very busy job, and if I miss an email or two, that is not my intent. So please reach back out to me. I'll look to see if I missed an email. But I am, quite frankly, in the most specific way, wanting to respond to every single citizen and be accountable to you all. So please feel free to do that when you get the chance. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all for attending. We care about this community together. That's why we're all here. And I thank you for your time and input and the feedback. Have a great night.